Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Career Dev. I am excited to continue the ABCs of career development, and today we're going to talk about P, which is for pay, P-A-Y. So a lot of us might say that we work because we're passionate about something, we want to be challenged, we're interested in a topic, but when it comes down to it, we need to get paid, right? Most people don't have the luxury of taking any job and not worrying about the pay. A lot of us have to figure out what is the salary or what are the hourly wages, and can that fit the budget that we need to survive or thrive. So I want to talk about pay and thinking about pay, especially when you're in a job search. I've seen a couple of things and I want to share those with you. I will say it is really important, if you don't already have a budget for your income and expenses and figuring out, and I know you may want to tear your hair out and thinking about the word budget or finances or money, and for many years for me that was a sore topic. Growing up, it was a sore topic. I remember my parents throwing the checkbook at each other and saying, "You figure it out," and the rob Peter to pay Paul concept, and really struggling to figure out how you're going to afford things, or even just the basics. And I am fortunate to have gotten into a career where I was making a nice salary. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I was laid off in October of 2023. Is that right? It's already? Okay. And I ended up taking a role that was a 40%, at least 40% pay cut. And again, thankfully and fortunately for me, I was able to have some finances in place to support me in making that decision. Not everybody has that. I totally understand. I want to talk about when we think about going into a job role, because I even remember my younger days in high school when I was working at the pizza place and I had the opportunity to go somewhere else and make more money. And I went to the manager of the pizza place and I said, "I can make this much money if I go here and work." And he said, "I'll give you a quarter raise. How about that?" And in 94, 95, like a quarter raise was a lot of money for a teenage kid. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be rich." And so I took it and I stayed and I continued to work there. When I started out working, and everybody I think has these stories, especially my generation and older, of, "Oh, when I started working, I was only making this amount of money," and it was not a double-digit type of wage per hour. And over time, we really have to think about, where are those dollars taking us and how are they supporting us in our life, and what is our value also. And I know a lot of you thinking about value, and even me thinking about value, it's like, well, priceless. Like, I am a really valuable asset to any company that is going to employ me. And you are. The hardest thing I would say for us to be able to do is to quantify what is that in a salary. And my advice is to do a lot of research. And this is something that I have done with clients, I've done for myself, taking a look at salary.com, Glassdoor.com, going out and doing searches to see what are people making, what is the pay range for these different types of roles. If you have, the nice thing about like salary.com and Glassdoor.com is, okay, if I live in this area and I'm doing this type of role, and I have this number of years experience or this education, I can look at all of those variables and be able to see what is the likely range that I am worth. And then I need to look at companies and see, okay, are there companies that are going to hire me within that range or not? And sometimes it's really, really hard to figure out what is that range. Sometimes it's not readily available, especially for a small company or a private company. It may be harder to locate and find. And sometimes it's really just taking an educated guess, especially when you're in the midst of negotiating salary or wages with a potential employer. So it's really important to do your research and to put together the facts of what you can find. I had found over 50% of individuals negotiate salary. So when they are offered a job and said, here's the job we want to offer you, here's the title, here's you already know the description from applying for it typically, and here are like the benefits, here is the salary. And then you have the opportunity to say yes, no, or you can renegotiate. So over 50% of people negotiate what that salary is or potentially what those benefits are. And I would say the biggest thing that people negotiate, in addition to the dollars, is vacation time. And nowadays, it's really the remote or hybrid work opportunities. Having that. So the vacation, the PTO, paid time off, sick time, that kind of thing. Where they're working, if that is something that's critical and important to them, and that they know that the organization will support that, because it's not like you're going to go to a company like Amazon who has this return to work and say, I want to work 5 days remote, and if you don't let me do that, I'm not going to work there. Well, screw you. Like, that doesn't fit with the culture and with the way, the direction the company is going. So you have to be mindful of that as well. So with the money, being able to negotiate, you have to have done your research and really looked at what are you worth, what is the range, and then also being mindful of what is the company offering you and how far, maybe how far outside of that range or to the lower end of that range is it? And is that something that you have the opportunity over the coming years to potentially climb in the organization? You have to be very cautious of that, though. Some leaders or managers say that those types of opportunities are there, and sometimes they're not. So just being cautious of that. Sign-on bonus is another one, and that depends completely on the industry and the type of role. And you definitely want to do your research to see if a sign-on bonus is something that is typical for the industry, for the company, for the role, all of those types of things before you even step foot in that sand to say, to ask that and try to negotiate that. But when we come to the salary and we think about those dollars, sometimes a job can have a range. So a lot of jobs don't still, but a lot of states have passed where jobs have a range published when the job description is put out. And sometimes these ranges are like within $10,000 to $20,000, and sometimes these ranges are like a ridiculous $50,000 to $70,000 stretch. And what I had learned even more recently in my own experience is interviewing for a very public company, very high-profile company, and for I don't know, it's not a completely low-level position, but when I went in to talk to the recruiter and have that conversation, she had asked me what is my minimum salary. And so I explained to her, and it was within the range, but it was towards the higher. It was like within, I want to say the range was like $25,000 to $30,000 was the range. So within that dollar, $20,000 to $30,000 difference from the low end to the high end. And I had mentioned I would prefer to be, I would say it's like in the 75 percentile, the 3/4 like the higher part of the range. And at that point, I completely appreciate the transparency and the openness of this recruiter. She explained to me that while she could propose that to the hiring manager, the likelihood in their culture and their organization was that I would not be offered that high of a salary range. And I asked her why. I took the opportunity to be inquisitive. And she said that typically somebody coming into the company from outside, say with minimal experience, would be in that lower $5,000 to $10,000 range, the first $5,000 to $10,000, and then somebody who had a lot of experience was coming in, and they would be like, say, the 10 to 15 or 10 to $20,000 range, like in the middle, almost the middle part. And from, say, like the 60th percentile to like the 100th, I don't even know if I'm saying this right for any math nerds out there, but from those higher parts of the range, she said the likelihood is that the only type of person that's going to hit in that range for the role is going to be somebody who already works in the organization, is transferring from another role into this role, and has the experience and the knowledge. So in my mind, I thought that was really interesting that it's published, but of course you're not going to publish something different, likely externally and internally. But the fact that a very, very small percentage of individuals who would even hit that higher level of the salary range would apply for the job. And most of the time, those people are already in the interview cycle. If they posted for it, a lot of companies open up the job for a week internal or longer. Typically, it's at least a week before they open up external. And why would a recruiter be talking to me? Maybe other than trying to find out, what that pool looks like outside of the organization. But I thought this was really insightful information as to the range and thinking about that. And that may be the philosophy for that company, and others may have different philosophies. And it doesn't hurt to ask either, or to get some insight there. Some people are afraid to talk about pay on the very first conversation, which it is, and you have to be very mindful of how that conversation even happens. Sometimes the recruiter comes out and just says it. Like, this is the range, like that recruiter did. What is your, minimum that you have to make? What are you looking for? What's the range that you're looking for? Those types of things. And it was really funny. Years and years ago, I had applied for a role outside of the organization I was working in, and when I had the call with the recruiter, we were talking, and I didn't quite fit all of the requirements for the job. I was missing like one piece that they felt was relevant and needed, but they were considering possibly pushing me forward despite not having that. Like, I could gain that and fill that gap over time or something like that. And the recruiter at the time had said, what is your salary expectation? And I gave her the range, and she said, I appreciate you sharing that with me. And she shared with me, like, what is the actual range. And at that time, it was probably 15, 20 years ago, at least. I had not done a ton of research. I might have done a little tiny bit, but I wasn't as prepared as I would have been today. And she gave me insight onto what the range is and kind of where I fit, what they were looking for, and if I was open to this lower range, which I was not at the time because my budget was higher than that from what I was already working, and there was just no way I couldn't go that far down with what I was doing. And as I was trying to especially as I was continuing on the growth path of and climbing more of that corporate ladder. It was just not going to financially work, and so it was very awkward to have that up front. But you know what? She saved both of us so much time, because if I would have continued in that journey and been like, oh, I could figure it out, I could work with that, then I may have gotten my hopes up when I shouldn't have, and they would have been wasting their time interviewing me when it likely would not have worked out, and I was not a good fit. When it came down to it, if I was offered the role later down the road, I would have to really think about it strongly before I said yes or no, because of the financial implications. I did have a client. Actually, it wasn't a client, a potential client who I had answered some questions for. And this client this potential client was asking a question about salary, and was given the salary range, felt that they were a little bit above where the salary range was based on their experience, their skills, their strengths, what they brought to the table, their expertise. And so when they continued to talk with the recruiter and talk about next steps in the process, the recruiter had mentioned about the money, and the person, who I'm so proud of, said basically that their minimum was right above where the high part of the salary was. And if the company was not able to make that happen, then it wasn't something that the person would be able to entertain or kind of even look at what the next steps are. It didn't make sense for either party to kind of move forward. And in that situation, the organization looked at that person and they said, you know what, we do want to take you into these next steps, and we're willing to consider that, what the potential salary, if it was a little bit higher, because they saw the value in that person. And kudos for that person for standing up and saying, this is my worth, and I do want to work with this organization, and I want you to pay me what I'm worth and my value that I could bring to the organization. So I'm very excited for that opportunity for that person and what they're looking at. The other thing with salary is you need to think about, just consider negotiating. I know it's hard to, and it almost feels like when people hate conflict, they are worried about negotiation. And I will tell you, I had negotiated my salary recently, and my mother and my husband were freaking out. My sister and one of my best friends, who are both in the HR space, were like, listened to everything that I said, saw all of my mind, like my thought process, and agreed and supported me and how I was looking at it, and the research that I had done. But my mom was like, I don't know, like that. Just be grateful for what you're offered, and excuse me, kind of that old school mentality, and the organization may not have a lot of money, like those kinds of things. Bless her heart, right? So I explained to her about more than 50% of people negotiate their salaries, and I bring this value to the table. And my husband was worried that they would take the job offer off the table, which is a possibility. The likelihood is small. If you are negotiating and you negotiate, say, $20,000 more when it's unrealistic for the range that they had originally talked about, for the job that you're going to be doing, like, it definitely depends on the organization and the role, and the salary, range that they already have. There's so many different variables that it's dependent on. But if you go in with some highball crazy, like, this is what I need instead, definitely they could think, like, this is ridiculous, we're going to take this off the table. The likelihood that they do remove the job offer is typically low. One thing that I have seen and heard about in the last few years is organizations that have made offers and then lose funding within their organization to support a role and end up having to take it back, which is terrible, terrible. Um, and so I have seen that play out, not a lot. So the likelihood that the job would be pulled because I'm negotiating a little bit more is unlikely. So those were some fears I had from different friends, family members, or not just fears, but support, fears, thoughts, all of that kind of thing in that process. So I'm interested in what you have done in your career and in the different jobs that you have taken, if you have negotiated, if you had evaluated the salary to see what is your worth. If you've taken a look at Glassdoor.com, excuse me, or salary.com, and looked at your experience, the type of role that you're in, and kind of seen for the area that you're in, all of that kind of thing, all of those kinds of things, like, are you hitting the mark with your salary? And maybe you're way above it, which kudos, and that's awesome. But maybe you're being underpaid and you're undervalued, and you may need to consider looking at what are some alternatives, or is it time to negotiate to see if you can get that increase. And always be mindful of not only the timing of it, but also how you're going to have the conversation and being really prepared. Doing your research. One of the things that you can also do is leverage ChatGPT to role play with you. Some people haven't thought of some of the uses for ChatGPT like this, but you could role play. Hey, I'm going to go into conversation with my manager. I want to request a 5% increase, or let's say a 3% increase off cycle outside of the performance year, and I want to be able to provide them with 3 solid reasons why I should get this increase. And so it can help you not only to brainstorm and identify, like, what are these reasons I can bring to the table. And so for my example of negotiating salary, I came back, I negotiated, and I said, here are a few reasons why I believe I'm worth these additional dollars. Like, these are some of the things that I bring to the table that make me unique and bring value to your organization with me being a part of it. And that was great support and help. You never just want to go to the table and be like, I need to get, 2% more because I'm awesome. Definitely make sure you do your research and have your support there and that it makes sense. And so definitely use ChatGPT as a role play and say, I want you to be the manager and me coming to you, and here are the reasons that I have that I believe that I should get this increase, or we should discuss this, and what are the potential outcomes of this, and let's go back and forth and role play and use that. And that is going to be a great resource to help you think through some of the potential answers or considerations that you might want to have that you may not have thought of before. And if you're role-playing with an individual, they may not necessarily think of all of these things too. That would be just as good to role-play with an individual, and you're going to get a little bit more. But it depends too on how you're prompting ChatGPT and what kind of questions that you're asking. So also make sure, like, is there something that I'm not thinking of that I need to consider before I go and have this conversation? Or what more do I need to do to be prepared? What resources can help me prepare for this? am I right in thinking that I should even negotiate this? Like, those types of questions you can use to see if that is going to be the right conversation to go after and to go have. And if you do, how can you be best supported in the conversation that you're going to have there? So with that, I wish you the best, and I hope you have a great day, and I will catch you on the next episode.